So welcome everyone to our next program in our career series from Berkeley Center for Law and Technology in Berkeley Law. Once again, Wilson has been kind enough to donate some time to us to explain a little bit more about certain areas of the practice of law. And this particular area is one near and dear to my heart. It's where I started my career and where I still spend a lot of my research time here at the university. So this is the group called Patents and Innovations Practice. You'll see that language for Wilson. For other law firms, you'll see patents. Other firms, you'll see IP. Other firms, you'll see no real label that you can match up, and you kind of have to hunt around. But Wilson labels things very clearly. So this is a patents and innovation group. And firms that do patent prosecution typically have something like this on their website, so you can at least find and compare. Unlike some of the other areas of law we've talked about, they're a little mysterious. Firms don't exactly tell you what they are. Patents is a pretty mature practice area, and the firms that are in this area are in it in kind of in a robust way. But there are differences. And I think that's the important thing. Just because the practice area is mature doesn't mean every firm's exactly the same. And in fact, it's the exact opposite. Firms vary a lot based on technology area, geography, whether they're general practice or whether they're focusing on patent areas in specifics or specifically. So this is a great view of how you'll see a patent practice in these large law firms and what they do independently, what they do in combination with all the other groups. So with that, let me introduce our two speakers or instructors for the day. I'm going to start with you, Madeline, because, well, you came from Berkeley. So I think the rules require me to introduce you first. So Madeline Elkins, Dr. Madeline Elkins, and don't be scared by this. You're going to hear from two doctors here, but that's not the only way to get into this practice. So Madeline came from Berkeley recently, but has a really interesting path through the patent agent ranks, starting as a patent agent, before she was a lawyer at Wilson, and then really having that benefit of the day she became an associate, she was the smartest first-year associate there that you could be, having all of that knowledge of working for years in a practice area and understanding the nature of a law firm. And then with her, Julia Minitti, Dr. Julia Minitti. So there's the second doctor. Don't be too scared yet. A partner at Wilson and leading this patent prosecution team there at Wilson. So thank you both for taking some time to join us. And like we always say, it's not just for Berkeley. This is kind of for nationwide, for students anywhere thinking about this kind of practice. So I want to start with the idea of patents and innovation, and I highlight the fact that both of you are PhDs, so you can kind of indicate where it is important and where it's not. So in this patent and innovation group, what kind of work are you doing, and does everybody need to have a doctor in front of their name?
Yeah, so Wayne, thank you for having us, and thank you for the introductions. Yes, please do not be intimidated. We did go to a lot of school, but we're practicing attorneys like you all will be in the very near future. Patents and Innovations, the Patents and Innovations group is a group that really is focused on working with companies to help them come up with an IP strategy around their business plan. So aligning your IP strategy with your business plan, and specifically to Wilson Sonsini, we're working with the early stage companies. So we're not working with the very large, I will say, life sciences companies that you're aware of in the space. We're working with the companies that are spinning out of universities and are just getting their legs underneath them and then growing with them over time. So maybe at the beginning they're a postdoc and a CEO, and then as time progresses, they're growing. They maybe go through financing rounds, they get acquired. So I think one thing that's a little bit different about our Patents and Innovations group compared to patent and innovations groups at other firms is that since we are so integral to the company at a very early stage, we get involved in other aspects of the company outside of just drafting patent applications and doing the back and forth with the patent office. So that is our bread and butter. We do draft patent applications. We do go back and forth with the patent office, but we're also involved in trying to secure IP from universities that are important to the company, or going through financing rounds, or helping with M&A or IPOs. And so you get a lot more exposure in our patents and innovations group to different aspects of IP and the role IP plays in the company than just the sitting and writing a patent application all day, which in certain firms that is what patents and innovations is. It's writing patent applications and corresponding with the patent office exclusively. So
I think one of the ways I often describe it, it's a different experience working for a company on their first patent than on their 1,000th patent.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And
very sure.
It's a different, it's actually just an entirely different career for the lawyer.
It is. It is. And I do have the perspective. I worked at another firm where we did work with larger, before I was at Wilson, I worked for a general practice firm that worked with larger companies, and it's a different practice, right? It's a fulfilling practice. It's an interesting practice, but it's different. So if you're the type of person that's sort of a startup personality, right? If you're really entrepreneurial, I think our practice is a little bit more suited to your personality as compared to someone who, you like doing sort of the more mature and more established portfolios and helping develop those portfolios and propagate them throughout the world. That's a different practice. So
I also think it changes the relationship we have with our clients, because we may be working for a company that's 3 people. It could be the CEO, the CTO, and 1 engineer. And so if you're talking with them about their first patent, you're interacting really with the direction of the company at its sort of first step out into the world. And so you're really the lawyer that they may talk with most. And so we often end up as kind of a point person for some of our other practices. I talk with many of my clients more frequently than they talk with anyone else in our group. And we start to really be a quarterback of the legal practice for some of these companies, even though our primary background is in patents.
That's actually something maybe you could elaborate on. And I love that idea of who you're talking with. You're talking with the business side versus if you're working on the 1,000th patent, they probably have an in-house legal team, not just 1 lawyer, maybe 3. Yeah. So it's a long ways from working on the 1,000th patent to the CEO. And it's a short distance from the first patent to the CEO.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a completely different interaction when you're working with someone who really doesn't have a lot of legal knowledge often, right? You're working with scientists, maybe the MBA that is helping with business development for the company. And so, and maybe they're encountering new problems it's always new things every day with a startup, right? There's lots of different spotting issues that come up. So it's a lot more dynamic, I would say, than, yes, you received invention disclosure from big company. You need to, search the prior art, decide if it's patentable, and write a patent, right? This is a lot more, okay, just a minute. You said you're having a meeting? Oh, just a minute. You said you just hired someone from a big company. You're thinking about all the various issues that come up with a startup, where you wouldn't have that exposure if you were working for a larger company. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I think it's just, it can depend a little bit on your personality. If you're a little bit more on I like how dynamic and how, variable every day is. I would say every one of my days is very different. And Madeline, I'm sure you as well. You don't really know what you're going to see in the coming week. I think some people like that. Some people don't like that. So it's just something that you have to evaluate your own interests.
My favorite phone call from in this kind of works where I started these type of smaller companies was, we're going to walk into a trade show in the morning and we're going to be showing X. Anything we should do first? Yeah, let me go cancel my evening plans. We'll fix it. My fault for not babysitting you better yesterday.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And then there's that education side of it too, that you learn, okay, I really need to educate these clients early on because that's going to save me, late nights and weekends sometimes. So yeah.
it is rewarding to know that you can keep people from hurting themselves sometimes.
That is true.
And big companies tend to not make those kinds of, they move slow enough to not make those kinds of mistakes. Small companies move fast. That's what makes them fun. But wow, they can hurt themselves in a hurry without good legal advice.
They can. Yep.
Well, I think, talking to both of you, you've got obviously the life sciences perspective.
Mhm.
And my experience is life sciences and tech are significantly different. The practitioners don't overlap a lot, though the worlds are merging. Life sciences companies are now tech companies also. So a lot of that is changing, but how do the two worlds sit side by side if for a student that maybe has an electrical engineering degree versus a PhD in one of the sciences?
Yeah, so I will say our group is primarily focused on people with some life sciences exposure. So we are not a patents and innovations group that's working on, electrical engineering projects or mechanical engineering. We're really more focused on life sciences focused innovation. And that's where we're looking to hire. So, we want someone who does have some life sciences bent to them. Yes, to your comment of companies turning into tech companies or life sciences companies are melding with tech companies, that is happening, is particularly in the AI/ML space, where we're seeing a number of I'm seeing, and Madeline can comment on her clients, but I'm seeing a number of drug discovery companies that are integrating AI/ML platform software to help, improve the properties of antibodies or small molecules, or even discover new molecules based on their algorithms. So there's the sort of component of, okay, well, do we need to file on the platforms, file applications, or think about patent strategy around the AI/ML platforms? And that's in the early stages, right? That's just starting to emerge, and we're trying to think about that and try to think about, how would you identify an infringer in that space, things like that. So if a third party was using an AI/ML model that you submitted in a patent. So yeah, there is an element of that. We do have that exposure, but we are definitely a life sciences focused group. Madeline, maybe you want to comment on, because you're
I do, because I'm one of the strange people in our group who really have a strong physical sciences background, and I'm kind of at the more biotech focused firm, and I think my sort of place in this firm is often sort of figured into that overlap in the way that biotech companies are becoming tech companies. And so especially if you think about medical devices, if you've got I think that's one of the first places that we saw this, as a medical device company develops an AI, or they've got image characterization, they've got hardware, or we think about some of our sequencing companies, they've got hardware considerations and imaging considerations, that whole universe of things. And now there's even a bigger wave of companies who are in some ways tech companies first, that are tacking into the biotech space and really finding their way to us as they approach these issues in MLAI and drug discovery. So we've got kind of a world of people, some people starting from biotech and finding their way that way, and some people from tech finding their way to biotech.
Well, if I'm somebody with a STEM background, I know I'm interested in patents. How do I look at websites, especially in this new world of early recruiting? I want to go ahead and apply because I know I'm interested. And how do I look at a website and understand whether my background, my engineering or my science background, matches the practice of that particular firm?
Yeah, I think it's probably best to you could probably tell from our website sort of where our focus is, that it's a little bit more in the life sciences, but I think you can always just feel free to reach out to people too. I think if you have a science background and you see someone, look at the website, all of our profiles are on there, all of our backgrounds are on there. You see, oh, look, I'm a physical chemist, and there's Madeline, she's a physical chemist at Wilson Sonsini. Let me reach out to her and just see if that's the type of expertise that would be something that, you know, we'd be hiring for. So that would be my suggestion. Don't be shy. I mean, people love to get interest in their profession, right? We all went into, and we're all doing what we like, right? We're doing it because we like it, and we continue to do it because we like it. So when someone reaches out and says, I'm kind of interested to learn about it, 9 times out of 10, we're going to say, absolutely, I'm happy to talk to you. So if you do have questions, reach out to people, particularly if you have some commonality too.
Yeah, that's probably the sweetest question for any lawyer to hear. I like what you do. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't happen at most cocktail parties.
That's right.
So.
But, as Vern would say, there's no shy lawyers, right? Don't be shy. You can talk to us. We're not scary. We all went through law school. We went through what you're going through, so we understand.
So Madeline, I'd like to. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I always take an informational interview. Like, I'm always happy to talk to somebody who, yeah, just wants to know before they apply. And I think that our group is always doing a coffee chat or a Zoom just to talk to people who are interested and are still trying to figure out what's going on.
Wonderful. Well, I wanted to focus a little bit more so people can really get this understanding between working on the 1000th patent and working on the first 3. So in your world, a little bit more about kind of what a day or a week could look like. And I'll kick it off by saying, look, if you're working on the 1000th patent, this is going to be my negative experience with working on the 1000th patent, but your Tuesday is going to look like your Monday, and your Wednesday is going to look like your Monday and Tuesday. It's very predictable. Mm-hmm. And that's really nice if that's what you want. But if you get bored easily, maybe I have that tendency, there's no break. And I think what you were saying is that what you do is a little bit wilder from day to day.
Wild in a good way. I'm definitely in the universe of people who does get bored. I was in the academic world for quite a long time and was sitting down to write, pitches for academic jobs, and came to the realization that there was no one single thing that I wanted to do forever. In fact, I was going to get bored if I even thought about building a life that way. And so I took a hard turn into IP law, where I could work on a ton of different things all the time, a ton of different technologies and work with. And this is going to sound like a small number compared to Julia's practice, but in the universe of 2 to 3 dozen companies, all of whom have different technologies and different needs. And it means that I get an extraordinary technical variety. And it also means that, every client is your favorite child. So they all have needs, and sometimes multiple people have needs at the same time, and it becomes a game of triage. And so, we have to be responsive to clients. We have to deal with big financings that may come up, a disclosure that may come up at the last minute where you're dropping everything and making sure things get filed. And yeah, that's really how the day-to-day works, because yes, there's the steady prep and pros that, I know this deadline is going to show up in a year. It will come, like spring. But there are things that do show up at the last minute, and our overlap with the transactional practice means you may drop everything to help out with the diligence. And that's where our most important moments for our clients is being able to stand in front of their VCs and their VCs lawyers and say, this is what the portfolio looks like. This is how we're covering the company. This is how we're demonstrating value. And this is how, we are the best company to invest in this space. And those are great places to be in, because it gives you that variety, technically, day-to-day, type of work. It's totally different.
Yeah, and about half of our patents and innovations group are patent agents. So these are people who have not gone to law school yet or are maybe starting law school soon. We do put people who have advanced degrees and work with us as agents through law school. So Madeline was one of them. She started here as a scientist and worked as a patent agent and went to Berkeley while working with us. But the benefit of having half of our group be scientists and agents, is that as a first year, second year attorney, you have people who are helping you do a lot of the day-to-day, evaluating invention disclosures, helping you write up patent applications so that you can start focusing on the meat of the issues. You obviously will have to learn. The first year is spent, you have to do the basics. You have to learn what a patent application is, how to draft, all that stuff. But you can pretty soon delegate some of that day to day so that you can focus on other aspects that the client needs you to focus on, whether it's thinking about freedom to operate for the company, or thinking about their licensing strategy, thinking about or connecting with them with licensing or M&A. I've got a client this week going through M&A, so helping them deal with diligence transactions for the M&A. They're getting acquired. That means or IPOs, and so you get that much more exposure as opposed to being in a patents group where you just do patents. You just don't get exposure to those elements, and not to mention if you're working for a big company, you're probably not dealing with things like M&A and IPOs. And they're past that, right? Maybe you'll do some due diligence for target companies for them, but you don't have the same, you just don't have the same role involvement in the company's big transactions. So yeah, and my day, similar to Madeline, it's very unpredictable. I don't know, I do have meetings set up throughout the day, and I do meet with all the various groups. We work on teams for clients. So, if I'm on a particular client, we'll have team meetings where we check in on all the upcoming deadlines. We'll discuss whether there's a transaction coming up we need to get ready for due diligence, or if we're working for an investor, we talk about that, all the various things that are coming up. But for the most part, then you go off and do it, right? Everyone's going off and doing their various things. Then you come collect and do it and meet again later. But you're planning for all the various things that could come up, and sometimes they change. You plan for this on Monday, and all of a sudden, all the company's going public on Friday. So I need to switch gears and focus on that instead. So yeah, it's definitely a dynamic practice. Very, very, very dynamic. It's not the sitting and drafting a patent application. It's a lot. Probably Madeline, you're probably doing a lot of managing at this point. She's got a lot of experience having worked as a patent agent for many years. She's delegating a lot of the day-to-day patent prosecution to patent agents, and yeah.
And that's become a different experience too, as an associate, being in a position where I'm not the one responsible for every technical detail anymore. I'm the one responsible for making sure someone has that knowledge and making sure that knowledge turns into patent strategy, and that patent strategy turns into value. And so it becomes a more complicated game of chess, managing up, down, and out. And I think that the associates, for the people who don't come in as agents but go straight into the associate track, they wind up in that position a lot faster. As Julia said, the first couple of years is you still got to learn the day-to-day prep and pros work. There's no universe where that doesn't happen. Those basic skills have to be developed, but you're much more quickly thrown into the position where you've got a team you're working with. The responsibility for the science is still yours, but the primary responsibility gets carried by someone else a lot faster.
So maybe the last question I give for both of you to weigh in on is that, what would you tell law students to do in terms of class selection and preparation? Because it's easy, somewhat the world of if you've got a STEM background, you can get a license in front of the USPTO. If you don't have a STEM background, you probably can't get a license in front of the USPTO. So it does narrow the field. Sometimes I worry that it narrows the mind a little too much in terms of how you view law school, that I'll just take every patent class that's there. Sure, easy to do. Beyond the easiest path, in the world that you're looking at, which is much more complex, business-oriented, counseling, what would you tell law students to make sure they experience, or classes they need to take in law school? And Madeline, I think I've got 82 classes in my list. I couldn't name them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have the benefit of some memory of the course selection. So there are the basic ones. I think my colleague teaches patent prosecution. That one has to happen. Transnational IP, Margis teaches a great class. That one is quite useful. There was a biotech law class that was extremely helpful for our practice. An introduction to some of the diligence work and overlap with licensing came with that class. I loved venture capital finance. That taught me so much about how our clients work. You know, when you will get handed the NVCA model stock purchase agreement, and you're going to have to look at it and see what those mean for our clients, and knowing what the guts of that agreement look like was really helpful too. Of course, BA. Yeah, I took SecReg. SecReg was interesting. Tells you a lot about how our corporate group works. That was helpful as well.
Yeah, I did not go to Berkeley, but I would say if you could take a tech licensing class too. I don't know if you mentioned that, but tech licensing and patent litigation, because we don't do litigation, but it's nice to see how someone's going to destroy all your hard work. And then, yeah. I took antitrust too. That can be pretty relevant, particularly there's some recent case law now that's coming out with some of these companies merging and having difficulty merging. But yeah, it depends a little bit on your interest. If you are interested in early stage companies, try to learn everything that's kind of involved that early stage companies are struggling with. But go towards what interests you too. I hate to tell people to just take courses for as a means to an end. Take it because you find it interesting. So,
well, kind of the same advice I hear from
antitrust and IP. There was a seminar called Antitrust and IP. That was specifically talking about patent pools and agreements not to litigate and some of the harder antitrust issues. That was great.
Well, and what I hear from both of you are really the business advice classes, that I'm not just putting your patent together, I'm helping you either avoid a catastrophic antitrust issue on putting a patent licensing agreement together, helping you with your financing, which, face it, nothing goes forward without financing. So maybe not doing the deal, but at least you can interface with the ECVC group or the emerging company groups.
Oh, we see those agreements all the time. We're always, we have to review the stock purchase agreements. So yeah, that's a very helpful course to take. I'm glad that they have that at Berkeley.
That's probably, if the one piece of advice anybody pick up out of this is that the fact that you're reviewing stock purchase agreements. Patent lawyers aren't operating, at least in some environments, they're not operating in silos. Others, they're completely siloed. It's just, again, what you want to choose for a career path. That's
right. Yep.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you both for taking some time. I know you're busy. It's great to have some experts help students both here at Berkeley and across the country.
My pleasure. Our pleasure. Happy to field questions, follow up if anyone wants to reach out. We're happy to discuss.
Wonderful.